The Dallas Cowboys lose in heartbreaking fashion on Monday Night Football. We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are breaking down the Cowboys' 27-20 loss to the Bengals on Monday Night Football. And Landon, I was rooting really hard for them to win this game. I really wanted to see them win 3 games in a row, to win this game on Monday Night Football, and to lose it the way that they did was soul-crushing.
Yeah. I mean, look, I thought, like, we'll talk about it. I think that there's lots of ways to view this game and and how the season is going, right? And I think that's the thing that happens when you start to have a losing season is that I think everyone's kind of motivations and everything changes. But you're right. Like, we still want to see these guys. I mean, speaking for ourselves, we still want to see these guys win these games. So when the Bengals were punting from their own, I think it was 20-yard line, and given to give the Cowboys back the ball with just over 2 minutes to go. Yeah, I was looking forward to the Cowboys marching down the field and kicking a potentially a long field goal to win the game and feeling good about it. And obviously that's not how that played out. But no. I will say that, like, there, we talk about the fact that there are probably no moral victories and this sort of thing, but I think in a situation like this where, I mean, look, you don't have playoff aspirations really. I mean, you are still technically eligible for the playoffs, but I think even if you had made it to the playoffs for some reason, obviously you weren't expecting a ton. No. So for the Cowboys to not win this game, but play the way they did without their starting quarterback, I think was a positive. I think was encouraging. But yes, in the sense that, hey, we're trying to win these football games, watching the way that went down at the end was truly heartbreaking. And I can only imagine if this was a game in a season where the Cowboys actually, like, truly needed to win that game, like, how absolutely devastating that loss would be to lose that way, right?
I think one of the reasons why I was rooting so hard for them to win is because their stars were playing really hard in this game. Yeah. Like, Micah Parsons was going full throttle on every single snap. CeeDee Lamb was out there with still a pretty banged up shoulder. He had 93 receiving yards in this game. Like, they were trying to win and they were playing hard on both sides of the ball. You would have loved to see them get this win after, all the energy they exerted, but to lose the game the way that they lost it has got to be really frustrating. And I think you saw it on their faces after the game. I mean, there's other reasons why they were upset after this game, which we will get to, but it was clear they wanted this one bad and they just couldn't get it done.
I gotta say, there was what felt like a strong, like, kind of dissonance in the Cowboys fandom after the game, like, that didn't seem to make sense with what I saw, like, in the game. I'll give you an example. The two things that I feel like I saw the most of outside of the talk of the injury news and the punt situation, right, was I saw a bunch of people saying, "Where's Micah Parsons? Why isn't Micah Parsons playing?" And then I saw is this the end for Mike McCarthy? And I mean, listen, I'm not necessarily, and I haven't been advocating. I obviously advocating for Mike Parsons to come back. I have not been advocating for Mike McCarthy to come back. But there's, like, zero way that you watch that game on Monday Night Football and the way how hard that team was still playing and how, like, much effort and, like, they and beyond that too, they looked organized. They had only had a couple of penalties, and mostly for the except for a boneheaded play by a down roster guy who was forced into a game special teams because of a bunch of injuries. I felt like they played a pretty well coached game. So I think that there's like, when losing happens, we all reach for our familiar punching duties and the things that we want to blame for why we think the Cowboys are losing. But I have to say, like, I could not have been more impressed with the way that the Cowboys defense played at certain points. I understand that the Bengals offense put up a lot of yards. They didn't put up a ton of points. And I felt like the redheaded stepchild, I hate to use that term, but with Cooper Rush, it makes sense, of this team. The offense did way better than we expected. I think, it starts with Rico Dowdle, but I just think looking at the way the team played last night, I'm certainly not upset with the way that they lost this game. I think that the effort and the execution was actually some of the best we've seen all year.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the defense in segment 2, and we'll talk about Micah Parsons, but I did want to, at the top, at least give some things that I was encouraged about. This was a game where the offensive line played really well in the running game. Rico Dowdle, 131 rushing yards in this game, 7.3 yards per carry. And that was with Cooper Beebe suffering a concussion early in the first half. They had to switch Brock Hoffman from right guard to center. They brought in TJ Bass. Your lowest graded offensive lineman was Chuma Udoga, who was starting at left tackle in this game because Tyler Guyton hardly practiced at all this week. And yet they were able to run the ball really, really well. I think Rico over the last 3 weeks has been one of the brightest stars for your team. And that has to have you encouraged, at least going into the final month of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back to the shows before the game, what we talked about, what do we want to see? Like, what are we trying to get out of these games? It's stuff that we can carry over into the following season, right? And establishing and kind of codifying this running attack, I think, was a big part of this. Like, kind of finally getting some organization, everyone seeing things on the same page, and even to, like you mentioned, to deal with Cooper Beebe kind of going in and out of the lineup, because that's the thing is he got out early because of a concussion, came back into the game, and then was pulled out of the game again. So I think just dealing with all the moving pieces of the offensive line and still having success in the run game, I thought was really, really impressive and a good sign for the Cowboys moving forward for sure.
Rico Dowdle, 361 yards over the last 3 games.
Yeah, over plus 40 rushing yards over expected the last 2 games as well. Just, really, really starting to see it. You're starting to see some of the big plays, some of the big runs and that sort of thing kind of come through. And it feels like the Cowboys have finally kind of leaned into making him the featured back of this team.
Yeah. And just as the offense in general, before we move on to the defense, it wasn't a perfect day by any means. They had a red zone turnover. They had a couple drives that stalled out, but for the most part, I thought it looked like what you expect to have from a backup quarterback. Like, they had some drives right after halftime that looked really good. They were able to move the ball. They ran the ball well. CeeDee Lamb got a ton of targets. I think this was a pretty decent day from the offense. I was hoping for maybe another touchdown or something, but pretty decent from a unit that is incredibly banged up right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things we talked about before the game was, if this offense can't get something going against the defense they're playing with the Bengals, then they probably weren't going to get anything going. So I think we saw enough out of especially the run game to feel good that there is something there. And yeah, like, look, let's keep this in context appropriately, right? Cooper Rush is still a backup quarterback. There were definitely throws that were left on the field by him because he's not a starting quarterback, right? It's a matter of a starting quarterback makes that throw just that much more accurate, and that much more accuracy results in a catch, right? And that happened, it feels like 3 or 4 different times when the ball was just a half foot too far behind the receiver, too far ahead. So I think, you live with that. You have to live with that kind of stuff with the backup quarterback. What you don't want to have to deal with is your starters, the players that you're supposed to be relying on, playing poorly. And I think we didn't see that. I think we saw those guys all play pretty well. Yep. They were obviously, I think it's a good thing when you're limited by Cooper Rush, because that's how it's supposed to look, right? Yeah. Cooper Rush is supposed to be the caboose that's dragging things down because you don't have your starting quarterback. we saw a starting offense that worked around Cooper Rush really well. It's just unfortunate that, we are dealing with the backup quarterback and he has limitations.
And that's kind of my hope for the next 4 games, like get to 20 or so points, because there are a lot of teams out there right now that can't get to 20 points when they have their backup quarterback on the field. And you're hoping with your starter, you're at least 7 points better. Now, I know that hasn't always been the case this year with Dak, but you would like to see the offense be like, hey, we can get to 20 points every single week, despite the offensive line injuries, despite the backup quarterback. So generally, I was encouraged by what I saw from the offense. Landon, I was really encouraged by what I saw from the defense, despite giving up 27 points and over 400 yards from scrimmage. Let's talk about that unit next. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. Here's what you need to check out. You can win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away over $30 million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it so easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Yesterday on the show, we predicted Rico Dowdle over 50 rushing yards. He got that. We'll see what the new lines are going into week 15. Should be a lot of fun. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. This episode is brought to you by Ice Shakers. Hey, Locked On Cowboy fans, I know that you're like me and your holiday shopping list is probably not done yet. I know I just started. Well, if that's the case, we have the perfect gift for passionate sports fans in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and will make the ideal gift. Created and used by the Gronkowski brothers, Ice Shakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with the workout bottles, and this is the gift that you've been looking for. Go to iceshakers.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see this awesome Cowboys Ice Shaker that I have. It's absolutely fantastic. It'll keep your water cold all day long. Order your team branded bottles today at iceshakers.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. Ice Shakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. Ice Shakers. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are discussing the Cowboys defense in this game, which I thought played really well in this one, Landon. Going into the 2-minute warning, the Cowboys gave up 20 points against arguably the best offense in the league. They created a turnover, an interception on an overthrow by Joe Burrow. They had some 3 and outs. I thought they did about as well as you can considering their opponent this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like, it's easy for folks to kind of come in after the game, check out the box score, and feel like, oh, the defense didn't do a good job. Like, it's if you don't look at the context of who you were playing and where everyone is at their point in the league, I mean, in the season, then you're not really kind of getting a full picture. This is a situation, obviously, where the Bengals were also 5-8 coming into this game, but the Bengals also had I think anybody who watched the crossover show with you saw the Bengals have been going through what is amounting to a historic season, in the sense that they have an MVP candidate on their team, a legitimate MVP candidate, maybe the best pocket passer in all of the NFL statistically this year, if you look at what's going on. And they can't even get to they couldn't even get to 500 because their defense had been playing so poorly, right? So the fact that the Cowboys defense was able to hold this Bengals offense to similar numbers that, like, let's say the Steelers did last week.
Oh, not even Pittsburgh gave up 40 or 38 points in that game.
Well, yeah, obviously points. No, yeah, but I was saying about everything else. The thing is, like yards and first downs were similar, but then like half as many points, right? Like that I think is exactly the kind of performance you were hoping for from the defense, because again, like we said, like there really wasn't anything that the Cowboys defense was going to do to like slow down Joe Burrow, right? Like you weren't going to get out of this game if Joe Burrow played the whole game with him throwing for less than 300 yards. Like first of all, they attempted, I think, close to 45 passes as well. 44 attempts. So yeah, like I think, this was a situation where Joe Burrow was going to get his, obviously Jamar Chase was going to get his. What you hoped was that you weren't also going to have T. Higgins and Gesicki also go crazy. And look, they got their catches, but the Cowboys mostly limited those guys, except for a few occasions, and were able to keep, like you said, the Bengals offense to 20 points, going into the 2 minutes. And frankly, there's just zero chance, I think, that they score another touchdown if you field that punt and get that ball.
Game's over.
Maybe the Cowboys don't.
I would say Dallas probably they would have recovered the ball at the 35-yard line.
Probably
under the 2-minute warning. Dallas probably just runs the ball 3 times, kicks the field goal, and the Bengals have maybe less than a minute left. If you don't get a first down, like if you get a first down, the game is over.
Even if the punt had gotten off and you had gotten the punt, like I feel like there's very little chance that the Bengals would get an opportunity to score a touchdown again. So I think, it's one of those things where if you look at the box score, you could say, hey, the 400-yard day offense, that's not a great day. But I think considering who you were going against, considering everything that had happened, the defense did everything you wanted them to do and more. And they put you in a position to win that game. Without a doubt. So, kudos to the defense. I mean, again, I don't want to advocate for something that's bad for the team, but I will say that it does give us another data point that Mike Zimmer, I think, is a capable defensive coordinator in this league. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, if you look at these second half possessions, they had an interception, a field goal, a punt, big play touchdown. The one that to Chase, but that touchdown only came after the block punt. Like if you just imagine the game ends, Landon, after the punt, right? The Cowboys field it, they run the ball. Your second half possessions, interception, field goal, punt. I mean, that's awesome against the best offense in the league. I thought they were outstanding in this game. And I know there's people out there that said, well, why did they step up after the punt, after that punt play? I mean, that was just such a big momentum shift. And it just felt like at that point, all the Bengals needed was a field goal. The Cowboys actually were better off having the Bengals score a quick touchdown there. I have a hard time criticizing the defense at all in this game. At all.
I mean, look, like it's an offensive league, and you've got one of the best quarterbacks, like we said, maybe the best quarterback statistically throwing the football this season, and 2 top 5 wide receivers. Like eventually, they're going to make plays. Like there's just like the fact that the Cowboys had held them that long, without making a ton of huge plays throughout the game was a really good sign. So I mean, I think it's unfortunate that it obviously played out the way that it did. But I think all things considered, the defense really, really played well.
And we should mention Micah Parsons because there's some idiots on Twitter that are saying, well, why didn't he have a sack or why didn't he have a tackle? Talk to a couple.
Or why did they move him around? That was another thing I saw, even though despite he was playing defensive tackle, he's blitzing from the middle.
I even saw Stephon Gilmore tweeting that.
I saw that too, and I couldn't believe it, honestly. I was shocked. So
Micah Parsons yesterday had 10 pressures. It's the second time this season he's had double-digit pressures in a game. 7 hurries, which is the most by any single player in the NFL this year. 3 hits, and there were 5 different pressures that led to an incompletion on third down by Joe Burrow.
That's 5 different incompletions on third down. Like that's ridiculous, man. Like one player caused 5 incompletions on third
down. Let's not forget he also drew 2 holding penalties that basically killed drives.
Which we had basically given up on Micah getting a holding call. Look, I mean, again, like the stats aren't everything. Watch the game. Watch what Micah was doing. He was chasing Burrow all throughout this game. The thing that we talked about before the game that makes Burrow so special is that he has this terrible offensive line, and he's still able to kind of escape pressure and make big plays. So it was a frustrating night for Micah Parsons for a variety of reasons, to say the least. But I thought he played lights out, and he did everything that you could ask him to do. And again, a muffed punt away from holding one of the best offenses to 20 points. Give me that all day. You can take your yards. Give me 20 points all day. I thought it was a good performance. It just unfortunately kind of all fell apart like the Cowboys at the end.
Yeah, I want to mention a couple other players outside of Micah. I thought this was another good game for Chauncey Golston, who continues to really develop as a run defender. He's somebody that I would really like to see the Cowboys bring back next year, even if not as a starter, but just as a quality utility player.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what his market is like next year, because I would love to have him back for what you just suggested. I think he's a glue guy who could make a lot of different defenses work. Let's see what his number is. I'd like to bring him back.
And Mozzie, I thought Mozzie, not a dominant game by Mozzie or anything, but I think a continuation of like, I think this is what we're hoping the floor is every week, where you're just getting solid defensive tackle play. You're not creating big runs in the middle of the defense. I thought what we've seen from him over the last 5 weeks or so has been very encouraging.
Yeah, he's back on the trajectory that we're hoping for. So let's kind of continue to see. Again, can't wait to see what this guy does in the offseason and what we get for 2025.
All right, let's talk about the biggest news coming out of Monday Night Football, and it's the injury to DeMarvion Overshown, who seems like he suffered a pretty significant knee injury. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show with Tony Wiggins and Tyler Rowland. 2 shows every single day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. Follow it wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Lena, let's talk about the DeMarvion Overshown injury, because in a lot of ways, the game feels very irrelevant after the injury to Overshown. The latest information that we have is Todd Archer reports that it's at least a torn ACL. The Cowboys know that his ACL is torn, but they are worried that there are several other ligaments that are torn, and that he's basically going to need a full reconstruction of the knee. Jerry Jones went on 105.3 The Fan this morning and said that they're not putting a timetable on his injury, but it's very unlikely that he'll be ready in 2025. This is just a brutal injury, not just for the Cowboys, but for Overshown, who was having, honestly, an all-pro season.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really hard not to kind of associate Overshown at this point with Sean Lee, right? Like, just a uber talented guy that like immediately pops on the screen. When you see him playing, like, just it's from the moment that he got on the field and started getting playing time, he became a playmaker, right? And so now to have suffered multiple ACL injuries, obviously this one sounds like it could even be more serious than the one that happened previously. The fact that his 2025 entire season is potentially at risk. It's absolutely brutal. And frankly, like, it's everything else about this game is overshadowed by this, right? Like, this is ultimately the news that is, I think, has the most effect on the 2025 season and the most effect on, me personally as a fan after all that. It's, again, there are guys on these teams every once in a while that, just stand out with their personality and like their work ethic and just like the kind of way that they go about their business. Overshown is that guy, right? Like, it's just a bubbling personality, like true Texas, like the most Texan I've ever seen, like in a person, as someone who's from Texas. Just proud to be a Cowboy, proud to be a Longhorn. To see him go through this, it just makes it doubly brutal. And it's hard to see these young men go through this kind of adversity when they work so hard to get where they are. The only bright light I could offer there is that, last time this happened, he had John Stevens Jr. to kind of work with together. And I think if I'm not mistaken, John Stevens Jr., not on the same time like they were last time, but he will have his buddy to kind of go back to and buddy up with again and have a partner in this again, which I think is important. So, nothing but the best for DeMarvion Overshown from us, I assume. So
it's just brutal. And what really hurts is he played another awesome game.
Yeah,
he had a fourth down. He had a fourth down stop where I think they were throwing the ball to Chase Brown, and he beat Brown to the ball. He had 3 pressures in this game. Like, he was all over the field. And I remember telling somebody I was watching the game with before the injury, it's like, it's pretty clear that he's just the second best player on this defense right now. Like, he was flying all over the field, and to lose him not only of this season, but potentially all of next year as well. It just sucks because he's one of their most fun players to watch. And the Cowboys have just had this awful injury luck at the linebacker position. You went back to Sean Lee, whether it's Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith, and now with Overshown, it just seems like they can't keep any of these linebackers healthy.
Yeah, and some of them have injury history and some of them don't. It's like they still kind of manage to fall into the injury bug problem, right? Yeah, it's unfortunate and it sucks. And the real sad part is that it's like, obviously outside of everything Overshown has to go with, the sad part on the team building side is that you're kind of back to square one with linebackers.
Gosh, yeah. I mean,
like maybe even further back than you.
Kendricks is a free agent after this year. Damone Clark has not developed at all. Now, I will say one of the bright spots from yesterday was Leafau. I thought he actually played pretty well in some of the limited snaps. I think he had 2 sacks in this game.
A sack and a half.
Sack and a half. PFF counts it as 2 sacks, but
that's right.
A sack. He's going to be in for a lot of snaps. This is where it's again frustrating that even someone like Marquise Bell, who played linebacker for you last year, you don't even have the option to go to him because he's out for the year with a shoulder injury. Like, it's just been one of those years, Landon, where every player that you had hopes that was going to turn into a great player or somebody that was already a great player has missed time, whether it's Dak, Zach Martin,
CD in some ways,
CD, Deron Bland, Trayvon Diggs, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Sam Williams, Marshall Nealand. It's one of those years.
Cooks, yeah, it's Ferguson. Like, I mean, literally, you could go through every star on this team. Honestly, I'm thinking about
Tyler
it.
Smith missed a game with an injury, which he's not been the same since.
Every player who's probably, I mean, honestly, now that I'm saying this, is maybe Hooker. Maybe, but I'm thinking, is there any player on this team who's ever gotten a Pro Bowl vote that wasn't injured at some point this year?
I went and looked at it yesterday. They had over $100 million in cap hits that was just out for yesterday's game, even before we got into the game.
Yeah, and they're lucky that Trayvon Diggs actually ended up playing in that game because it would have been more.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's injury regression hits and it hits hard. And the Cowboys had been kind of lucky at a certain point in the last 2 or 3 years, but certainly not lucky enough to warrant the bad luck that they've faced this year. So, the only thing you can hope is that you're saving up all that injury regression and you can bank it for next year. Maybe you'll luck out and get some positive injury, situations next year, or at least a healthy situation next year. But yeah, again, it's every injury is brutal. Long-term injuries are especially brutal.
Yeah.
But situations like this where you have a good kid who's had now feeling like basically back-to-back knee injuries like this, that's just really hard to watch because it's such a long road of recovery they have to face, and to kind of turn around, work so hard, and then get injured and have to kind of go back into that hell it's brutal. And I have nothing but respect for Demo and the way he's handled it so far. His tweet out last night was inspiring. It's incredible to see a guy remain so positive in the face of such terrible news.
Yeah. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Go check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here on Wednesday.